And then that night, I dreamt about him for the first time, and he was in the dream. And I remember saying in the dream, Adam, don't let this be a dream. You have to tell me that you're really here, that I'm not going to lose you again, and that I'm not dreaming. And he said, no, Mom, you're not dreaming. I'm really here, and I'll always be here. And that he was proud of me.
Hello, and welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. This podcast is about exploring the grief that occurs at different times in our lives, in which we have had major changes and transitions that literally shake us to the core and make us experience grief. I created this podcast for people to feel a little less hopeless and alone in their own grief process as they hear the stories of others who have had similar journeys. I'm Kendra Rinaldi, your host. Now, let's dive right into today's episode. Today on the podcast, I am talking with Shana Belyeu, soon to be Shana Winter. We will talk more about that. As you guys are listening to this, she'll be Shana Winter, founder of Speak on Suicide. She began her grief journey after the tragic loss of her 15-year-old son, Adam, to suicide. And she is driven by a promise to Adam that his story wouldn't end with his death. And she has dedicated herself to sharing his life and the impact of his loss and her own path toward healing. And I am happy that we were connected by a friend that we know in common, somebody else that's been on the podcast, and that you are here. So thank you, Shana, for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you today.
I am happy you're here. And of course, just with the bio, then listeners can now decide if this is the right time for them to listen. A lot of times when there's sensitive topics, people sometimes need to kind of be warned. And suicide is one of those that a lot of times can bring a lot of emotions and a lot to the can bring up a lot of emotions for people when they are listening, either by their own experiences. So just know that that's what we'll be talking about. But this one's really more, I think, a story about love and the commitment of yourself to your son, and then this journey of paying it forward and really living his legacy through what you do now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So welcome. So Shana, tell us about you, where you live, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so my name is Shana. I live in South Florida in a town called Davie near Fort Lauderdale. I lived down in Florida for about 30 years. I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and I'm going up there later today to get married this weekend.
It's so, I know as we started recording, you're like telling me, I'm like, how do I pronounce your name? And then you're like this, but you won't have to know it very long. So as you guys are listening to this, she will be Shana Winter, her new married name. Very exciting, very exciting. And that's a big change in itself. That's a whole other conversation, because even getting married can bring up even emotions of grief
Yes.
as well, because there's a lot of change that happens.
Right. Everything brings up a lot of emotions. And what I tend to say is that my happiness is conditional. I have found happiness. I am happy in my life. I am happy in my relationship. I find joy in things. I enjoy things, but it's all conditional because Adam's not here to celebrate it with me. So we incorporate him into every part of our lives, and I incorporate him into every moment of mine, not just through Speak on Suicide, but just in my being. But yeah, it's nice to have something good to celebrate and to bring people together.
It's one of those things that with grief, like even just with the title of this podcast, Grief and Gratitude, it's something that a lot of times we don't realize is that emotions can coexist. And sometimes when we're in that midst of grief or sadness, we don't realize that there can be this other part. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be and. So right now you are in a moment of a lot of change and joy that's coming in your life. amidst your grief journey? Because it's very recent since Adam's passing. So if you can share about him and a little of the circumstances of his death, it doesn't have to be too much in detail, but just the type of things that help us also as parents, especially because he was 15 at the time of death. It's important for us to have these conversations openly and to take away the stigma of suicide, because the reality is that it is it's like that's the last drop of what it is, but it's really a mental health that leads to the why they die. Is that correct? Would that be a right approach?
I think in general, yes. There was certainly something going on with him, but Adam, I think, was different in his suicide in that it seemed to be very impulsive. And although he did have struggles and did struggle with anxiety, um, I don't know that I don't have any belief that he was depressed, that he was currently struggling the way he was. So Adam was, I mean, every parent says this, but Adam was an incredible kid. Um, he he was the most deliberate thing I ever did. A lot of moms, they get pregnant, they have a child, they're a mom. I couldn't get pregnant. We tried the old fashioned way. I did 3 rounds of in vitro, couldn't get pregnant. And so we decided to adopt and actually traveled around the world. And he was adopted from Kazakhstan and came home 3 days before his first birthday. So I didn't just become a mom. And then, so Adam he also had cerebral palsy, which we did not know until we got him home and took him to doctors. But Adam thrived. Um, I wish I could show pictures, but Adam, I don't know how much you or your listeners know about cerebral palsy, but um, the way I describe it as a complete layperson is it's kind of on a spectrum, but not like autism and Asperger's is on a spectrum. Um, at its core, the way I understood it, cerebral palsy is caused by a lack of oxygen to the brain. So you can have a small lack of oxygen or a more severe lack of oxygen. So it affects different people differently. Adam was not affected cognitively. He was affected physically, mostly in his lower body. When he was young, it was also his fine motor skills, but mostly it was in his walking and his gross motor skills. So he was in physical therapy. He had 2 surgeries, one before kindergarten, one before ninth grade. And through all of that, he was like any other kid. He got his brown belt in karate. 6 months after his second surgery, he ran a 5K with us. He ended up working with a personal trainer after 6 months after his surgery. So for about 6 to 8 months, he was working with a personal trainer. He played flag football. And so he was like any other kid. In 6th grade, when he started middle school, which coincided with COVID, but it started before COVID, he started struggling with anxiety. And that was more because of a shift into middle school. Lots of teachers telling him, not caring what other teachers had for assignments and saying, you need to figure things out for yourself. You're not in elementary school anymore. And Adam was a perfectionist and a people pleaser. And so he internalized that and conditioned himself to not ask for help and to not stand up for himself and not advocate for himself, not only in school, but at home. So eventually, after a few months, we were able to get him into counseling. That coincided with the beginning of COVID. And he was in counseling online for 18 months and really did well with it and learned the skills to advocate for himself and stand up for himself. And by the time he went back to school in 8th grade, after a couple months, we stopped the counseling because he was reintegrated back into school and doing very well. So he also, I said, excelled at things. he learned chess in second grade at school and
That's amazing.
obsessively played chess.
That's so good
Watched,
too with the
yes,
brain, you know, how it makes you so alert. I do not know how to play chess. My son has tried to teach me, and every time I go play with him, he has to tell me the rules all over
right.
again.
And it was great in him learning how to strategize and think 5 moves ahead. He watched YouTube videos of someone who, what's the word, narrated
Oh,
chess
okay.
tournaments and chess
Oh, yeah.
games. And just he was obsessive about it, but in a good way. I mean, when he had his phone in ninth grade or 10th grade and the teachers were like, you got to put your phones away, they'd go up to Adam and he's playing chess on his phone. I'm like, well, Shauna, how do I punish him for playing chess? I can't do that. He
Well,
became
it's
a
still not
voracious,
doing what he's supposed to be
right,
doing in the class, right? But it's a
right.
thing that it's like it's still something that it's productive, right?
He became a voracious reader once he was able to read, and read all 7 Harry Potter books in one academic year. So that's the kid he was. Um, so, even in high school, he struggled with the anxiety a bit, but, he was not depressed. He joined a new club at school the day before he took his life. So,
Yeah, that
and
doesn't
recently,
make yeah, that doesn't add
it
up,
makes no
right?
sense.
Mhm, mhm.
And recently, I actually spoke with his therapist, um, from middle school, and I was telling her what's going on, and she said, Shauna, you didn't miss any signs.
Mhm.
There were none. There were a couple incidences a month and 2 months before he died that, in hindsight, maybe were jumping off points to something more serious going on. But honestly, I talked to him and he talked to me about them. And I said, do you want to go back and see your counselor? And he said, no, I'm okay. I'm just letting you know about these things, but I'm not going to do anything. I'm okay. And I thought we talked about everything, but,
Mm.
like so many people do, he suffered in silence. And that's the scary part, especially with teenagers. You can look at the warning signs and say, oh, a change in sleep pattern. Okay, well, he had trouble sleeping during the week. So he caught up on his sleep on the weekends and sometimes slept till 11 o'clock in the morning. Is that a a um, a sign that he's potentially suicidal, or is that being a 15-year-old boy?
Yeah, because they stay up till like 4 in the morning playing, and in his case, probably playing chess till 4 in the morning.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So you don't know, and that's, for parents out there, that's the scary part. Um, so I don't know what was in his phone or on his computer, because the night that he took his life, he scrubbed his phone. He deleted all of his apps. He deleted all of his conversations. He deleted all of his search history. He deleted everything up until his last conversation with someone. And, the police tried to go through it forensically and see if they could recover anything to find out what was going on, and they couldn't.
Wow.
So I
He
don't
had
know what,
another he would have had a whole other career there as someone in the tech industry, like just how savvy to be able to know how to do all that. But so
right.
that on that particular day, that night before or the day?
So he shot himself a little after 9 o'clock at night, and he
And
was at
so
his father's house. So I only know what I've been told, but what I've been told is consistent with,
with
um,
what the police have told you and what you
correct. Yes. So he went to school that day. Um, his father told me he did his homework that night. He was in a decent mood. Um, his father went to sleep early. Probably got into bed around 8, and around a little after 9 o'clock, he heard a gunshot. Um, he got out of bed. He went looking for Adam around the house. Didn't see him in the bedroom. Didn't see him in the family room. Didn't see him in his play area. And um, went and tried to get into a bathroom, and the bathroom was locked. So he had to break the handle of the door and go in, and he found him in there.
Wow.
Adam
And
was alive. He was actually still
he was
breathing.
alive.
And the paramedics came. Between the 911 call and when the paramedics took Adam to the hospital was literally about 15 minutes. It was very fast.
And you knew, when did you get the call from his dad?
9:28. So right after the paramedics left, he called me and told me, told me that he was still alive, and I drove to the hospital. Adam, I waited, seemed like forever, but it was probably about 40 minutes, maybe an hour. And then I was told that that I would be talked to in a room. A patient advocate came and got me. My old next door neighbors met me at the hospital, and so they were with me. The patient advocate took us into a room and told us that the doctor would be in to see us. And anyone knows that's not good. But I was still willing him to be alive. And the neurosurgeon came in, I don't know how long after, maybe 5-10 minutes. And as soon as he walked in the room and sat next to me, I said, "Is he alive?" Because that's all I wanted. I just wanted him to be alive. And he said yes, but that he was not going to survive his injuries. So they asked if I wanted to see him, and I said absolutely yes. So they cleaned him up a bit, and then took me back to see him. And he was alive, and his heart was still beating when I got to be with him. And I got to sit with him and hold his hand and talk to him and kiss him. And probably about 20 minutes later, the doctor came around, knelt down next to me, and told me that a couple minutes ago his heart had stopped beating.
So it was while you were there and with him that his heart, but they didn't come and tell you like right away. They let you kind of have that moment before they told you that it had been a few minutes before that his heart had stopped.
Yes, yes. And I think they turned off the machines, the beeping of the
Mm-hmm.
machines. I know that the ventilator was still breathing for him. And he said, we're going to turn that off in a couple minutes. And I said, okay. And that was really important for me to be there. I wasn't there when he was born. And that was always kind of an empty spot for me. So to be able to be there when his heart stopped beating was really important to me. And not all family members, not all survivors of suicide loss get that moment. Not all survivors get to even see their loved one, depending on how they died or what happened. And so, to say in all of this that I'm lucky is the strangest word to use. But there are times in all of this that I am lucky. I'm lucky that I got to be there with him, that I got to hold his hand, that I got to talk to him. They say that hearing is the last thing to go. And so, I choose to believe that he heard me and he knew I was there. Um, yeah. So I know the name of the podcast is, includes gratitude. And so I am very grateful that I had those moments, those minutes with him.
Thank you, Shana, for sharing those last moments with him. And I know it's hard to reshare it, but that talking about it a lot of times is part of the journey as well. And it has been for you, especially since you created a whole advocacy around this topic, and it's been part of your journey. So
And
this was
and
in
just to interrupt,
2023. Yeah.
I think it's important for me to say it, but I also talk about it because it's important for people to hear it.
Yes.
Because you mentioned the stigma of suicide and people dying by suicide. People don't talk about it.
Hmm.
And by sharing, I'm hoping that other people will find a safe space to open up to someone or to even open up to themselves and share their stories, whether it's of suicide or any other grief or any other trauma or any other loss. Because people don't want to hear it and people don't want to talk about it and people don't want to ask about it.
Hmm. Yeah.
And, for you to be in a position now to ask me questions about it, I'm sure is not easy. But that's why I'm here. I'm here to talk and I'm here to share and I'm here to um, hopefully create that safe space for people.
It's interesting because with what you said about the asking questions, a lot of times when someone posts, let's say on Facebook, that someone's died, and then they don't, then you're like, there's always this curiosity. Like our brains are always so curious, yet you always want to also be respectful of a person's journey. And a lot of times, the how in that particular moment when you are showing your support and love to someone who's just lost someone in their life, who's somebody, it has died, um the how is not usually the most important reason at that moment, right? It's because ultimately you're just you're accompanying the person and supporting the person of their grief. The how and the details may come later on that you want to ask more in case it will, either to ease your own brain, that sometimes like literally you're like, it's we try to piece things together. It's like watching a movie and not knowing, and like you just see the ending but you didn't see the beginning, and you're like, how did that get to that point, right? um so it's just normal for us human beings to be curious, and it's okay to ask, all timing wise, the connection that you have with the person. There's different ways of kind of approaching that. So for you, how was, I have a lot of questions, of course, but I'll ask you this. Like, how was it for you when people would reach out to you? Did you at any point feel very uncomfortable towards in the beginning sharing the details of his death? And did that comfort come from as you were kind of sharing more and later on? Or from the beginning, were you open to sharing that the cause of death had been by suicide?
I was open from the beginning. I have always been one who gets through things by talking things out. So I never hid it. I never didn't say it. I never, I would talk to my friends or call my boss, or people would reach out to me, and I never said anything other than he took his life or he shot himself, or and then I also kept relaying what actually happened. And that was to people who were very close to me, my very good close friends, who knew all of the steps of adopting him and his journey with cerebral palsy and his journey with anxiety and his journey with everything. I always talk about him. And actually, I was trying to figure out if I would be able to give his eulogy. And I didn't know how I was going to be able to do that. But frankly, I didn't want anyone else to do it. So I was trying to figure out how I would be able to give his eulogy because I didn't want anyone else to do it. And I was talking to a friend and she said to me, Shana, all you ever have done is talk about Adam. So just talk about him. So I wrote him a letter and I read the letter as his eulogy at his memorial service. And looking back, I never mentioned in the letter that it was a suicide, but I figured that people there knew. I was never hiding it. But I also, in the 15 months, because when we're recording this, it's been about 15 and a half months. In the time since, one of the things I've learned on my grief journey is I believe it's to quote Dr. Seuss, don't be sad because it's over, be happy because it happened. So I try not to just remember how he died because that was one moment. I try to remember how he lived, which was 15 and a half years. And when he was growing up, he was just this happy kid who had a thirst for knowledge about anything. And we even coined the phrase at one point, he didn't have an attitude, he had Adamtude. And so
That's so cute.
I try to remember him that way. And I try to, I guess I try to live that way, but that's not as easy to do.
Yeah, I heard this. I forget if it was in one of my, sometimes because I have so many conversations about death that I don't remember if it was somebody I was interviewing or when I used to facilitate in youth groups, in grief support groups, but that we all make decisions every single day of our lives. And with suicide, it just happens to be a one decision that a person took that they can't take back on, right? Or they can't remake. And we all have those choices, good, bad, like whether you choose to not stop at a stop sign a moment. That's a choice, right? That moment. And sometimes that could be the decision that ends up causing your life, as well. Or if you're speeding, that could end up being the decision that costs your life. In this case, you know it was one act, yet to be remembered by that last choice while you had so many other moments in life that were just beautiful, and other choices that were made that were nice. It doesn't sum up a person by
Right.
remembering them
Doesn't
from that
define
life.
them.
It doesn't define them. Yes, that's the right word. um Now it's 2023. What month? What date was his death?
November 15th.
November 15th, 2023. I'm in awe, first of all, not only that you are at a point that you're talking about it, I'm in awe of the fact that you have a website and already are doing all these things of support, because it for many people, yes, doing something active and already in honor of someone is part of their journey. So take us into that. At what point then did you in your grief journey did you say, I need to do more?
Well, in his eulogy, Adam and I shared, as many people do, Hamilton. He knew every word to every song. And for his 11th birthday, on his 11th birthday, literally days before the country shut down, I took him to Hamilton. So the
Was it
last
there?
song,
Was it did it come to Florida, or did you go to Broadway?
it was in Miami.
Oh, awesome.
It was in Miami. So the last song in Hamilton is Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story. And that always hit me. And Adam and I talked about it sometimes in the car. And I would even say, are you going to tell my story? And so, as part of his eulogy, I promised him that his story wouldn't end, that he had too much going for him to let him end at 15. At that point, I had no belief that I'd literally be talking about him and telling his story. because he would not be happy with me for it. He tended to be, especially as a teenager, he tended to be private. But so I knew I was going to do something, but I didn't know what. I was again lucky. I have gratitude for the fact that there is a group in Broward County, Florida called the LOST Team, Local Outreach to Suicide Survivors. And these groups exist in different places, but I think it's one of two in Florida. And they are a group that offers support groups and support to survivors of suicide loss. The detective the night at the hospital told me about them. So I was in touch with them very quickly. And I started going to support groups 2 weeks after Adam died. And so again, I was around people who would listen and who knew what I was going through. And I never felt alone about anything that I was feeling or thinking or doing, because that's part of the stigma of anything, is that you feel alone. In a mental health struggle, you feel alone. If you're a survivor of suicide loss, if you're struggling with suicide, you feel very alone. And so very quickly, I had a community of people who understood. And that has been pivotal and so important for me. So I had that. So I've been talking about it. I'm a lawyer by trade, so I'm also very used to talking and very comfortable talking in front of groups. So about 5 months, 6 months after Adam died, I had a friend at work who did a lunchtime talk about her experience with colonoscopies and her first colonoscopy and being diagnosed with colon cancer. And she did a lunchtime talk through, on video through work, and talked about it. And I sat there and I'm like, I want to do this about Adam. I want other parents to know that it can happen to them, because I never thought it would happen to me. And I want people to know. And so I started Speak on Suicide. And at first I didn't know I had no idea what it was going to be. And the first thing I did was I bought bracelets that said, it's okay to SOS, which can be Speak on Suicide, or it can be just ask for help. And I put the suicide hotline on them, 988. And so at first that's what it was. And then I started thinking about speaking, and I went to a NAMI conference, the National Alliance for Mental Illness. I went to a NAMI conference in Miami and started talking to people to try and make connections. And I heard a man named Dennis Gillen speak. And for anyone who doesn't know him, go find him and look him up. He now has a podcast called Half a Sorrow, and he's a nonprofit called Half a Sorrow. And I heard him speak, and he lost two brothers to suicide 30 and 40 years ago. And he talks about his journey. And I looked at him and I said, that's what I want to do. And so it's evolved very naturally. And now I speak to anyone who will listen. I'm part of, then I developed a website, and speaking engagements. And so now I speak to anyone and everyone who will listen. I'm part of different suicide prevention coalitions and different groups, and I'm trying to speak at different workshops, and I was part of a panel at the Broward Mental Health Summit last year, and was part of a panel in front of 700 people. So now I'm just doing whatever I can.
But a beautiful way to live on his legacy too, of just, bringing this awareness. It's like we never really know like what someone's journey on this planet is and what our purpose is really a lot of times. And sometimes our lives are short. My sister died at 18, and sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, but she didn't even go to college, or she didn't get
Right.
married, and we think of those things as the things that define us, yet we we touch so many people's lives in our day to day, and we impact people on a day to day. So even Adam at the age of 15 had already had an impact on so many
Absolutely.
people's lives, and touched so many people's lives, including your own, of coming into your own life to be your child, at the age before one. So everyone's journey is different. But then with you continuing on now this legacy of speaking on this topic, I wouldn't have this podcast, by the way, if I had not experienced grief, right? I wouldn't have
Right.
it. Right. So we all have certain things. And it's not that you're like, again, it's that the gratitude is, I'm not grateful that this happened, and
No.
hence no, I'm grateful, period. And I'm also,
Correct.
grieving. I'm grateful I can have this effect and do this for others. It doesn't take away from the grief. So you are grateful that you're able to educate others about the topic and bring this to the table for conversation, and educate others about the topic of suicide, and at the same time be grieving. Adam, you are getting married as we're talking about this, and I am curious about your home. Is your home right now where you're going to be living when you get married? And is this the home where Adam lived? And how this part of him not being in your life right now physically, how you're still finding ways of incorporating him into your day to day? Because you mentioned something even with the wedding. I'm even curious how he's going to
Okay.
come and
Mhm.
play. If you can share about that.
So I got separated and divorced from Adam's dad when he was 3 years old. So I moved into the home where I'm living back then. And so this is where I raised Adam since he was 3. So there's memories everywhere. His room is still as it was. Um, Pretty much the only thing I changed was there was a basket of clean laundry on his bed. And so I've put it away. But that's kind of it. I have pictures of him all around the house. I have two, blown up pictures from the funeral that I still have in the house. So he's everywhere. Um, when this happened, I was with my now fiance. His name is Ed. Um, I was with him. He was living about 2 hours away because of his job. So he drove to the hospital that night. Got there after Adam died, but he got there for me. And then he started staying here full time and commuting back to work, and eventually started living here officially. And then got a job closer to here. So now he's a
Yeah, because
15-minute commute. Not a,
a 4 hour drive total in a day. That's a big one.
so we will live together here. He is wonderful. He was wonderful with Adam, loved him so much. And he and Adam had their own special relationship and certain things that they did at having their guy time. And Ed is wonderful about my grief. He's very understanding. He's had to learn a lot, but he's been willing to learn. Um, when soon after Adam died, clearly I was crying a lot. And one night Ed said to me, yeah, I hate to see you like this. I hate to see you crying every day. I hate to see you hurting so much. So am I allowed to curse?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. So I looked at him and I said, tough shit. I said, I lost my son. I will be sad forever. I will cry at times forever. You need to learn to be okay with that and just hold me and let me cry. And he did. Um, so we will live here together, and at some point we will move out of this house and I will deal with it then, but I'm not ready to now. So we incorporate Adam into everything, and I literally incorporate him into Um, me, this necklace that I have is actually Adam's fingerprint and his birthstone. The funeral home told me that they could take fingerprints and that there are companies that do jewelry and other things. So I ordered this immediately, and I've worn it since I got it about a week and a half after he died. So he's everywhere. In terms of the wedding, Ed and I are both Jewish, so we have a ketubah, which is kind of like the Jewish wedding license. It's the contract that we sign, um, committing to each other, and we incorporated Adam into that. It essentially, there's a part that to me has vows of what we promise to be for each other, and we added promises about honoring Adam and keeping him in our lives. So he's literally into our marriage contract. Um, so he will be there. Um, his
That's
school,
beautiful.
thank you. His school, after he died, the kids in his grade, in the 10th grade, got together for a couple lunch periods and painted rocks for me. So I have those rocks, and I take one with me everywhere. And so we're going to have rocks at a couple of them. I'm traveling, so I can't take all of them, but I'm
You don't want to just pay extra
right,
luggage and just take a whole.
right for 53 rocks. No, um, but we are incorporating him into everything, into
Mm.
everything. And people can think of this what they want, but this is what I do, and this is how I do things. I have jewelry that I've had made with his ashes.
No,
And we actually,
I interviewed someone that's actually exactly what she's in Colombia, but she does that as well as with, she can actually incorporate not only jewelry, ashes in the jewelry, but also breast milk. She lost a child,
okay,
newborn. And so like droplets of even breast milk within the jewelry piece so that mother child bond
right.
continues to. So there's
This company
any,
started doing that. Yeah. And I think they
mhm.
can do hair also.
Mm.
Um, but our wedding bands, because I wanted Ed to have some and something. So our wedding bands will we have them already. Our wedding bands have his ashes in them. So he's incorporated into everything.
Yeah, and everybody, and that's the thing. It's that you said it. People can think whatever. That's the thing. People can think whatever they want because again, it is not their journey; it's yours. And whatever brings solace and comfort to the person that is grieving, that's I think what's the most important, and what brings that connection, and what makes you feel connected to your
Right.
son is what is most important. And the same goes with even the bedroom. There's people that sometimes, I know of someone that lost their child right at, like, it was a stillbirth, and when they got home, the parent
In
of
the
the child of
nursery.
it was a grown person. They come home and the nursery's already gone, right? So they never even had a chance to even grieve that grieve their child because it was already like disappeared. And other people keep things longer, and there's no time for things. It's whatever, like you said, it will be the right time when it is the right time. It's like there's not a specific number,
Right.
for
There's no right or wrong way to grieve
no at all.
in all of that,
Yeah.
in all of that.
Yes, everything is just, how it is, and that is what it's appropriate for each individual. Now, when somebody else is choosing, in this other case, it was a it was the lady's mom that did that. So she didn't have a say in her grief. It was
Right.
her, that was someone else controlling how she was to grieve. So that's a little, it's like allow people to grieve their own way, like in your case with all the different things. It's so beautiful to see how you're incorporating him into all these different aspects of your life, bringing his name into every conversation, keeping connected in that way. Now, what are ways in which you feel that you get these little taps on the shoulder Are there any particular moments that you feel these little taps on the shoulder that you're like, okay, I know you're I know you're here in some shape or form?
Sometimes, not literally a tap on the
Yes,
shoulder,
no, yeah,
except
you know
right.
what I'm saying, and that's yeah, those
But
moments of like that full on connection, whether it's talking about him, whether it's yeah, like how we continue these connections.
well, for me, the connection is talking about him all the time. But when I feel him and when I talk to him, is a lot when I'm outside. And for me, I tend to go to things that we connected on. So when I would drive him to school in the morning and the moon was still up and visible, we always thought that was really cool. So I talk to him when I see the moon and I feel him in the moon and the stars
I love that.
and the clouds,
Yes.
um, birds. They say the cardinal. I have yet to see a cardinal, but I feel him with any bird flying. And maybe that's because he had trouble walking. But I feel like, I talk to him with birds and in the wind. So I feel like that's when he's talking to me.
Nature is
Um,
so powerful. Nature is like, it's not only like this connector to something more, but it's also just so healing to be in it, in nature, right? Do you feel that? Yeah.
yes, yes. Even though as a teenager, we took some nature walks, but if I wanted him to go back to a place and go again, he's like, Mom, I've seen it. I don't need to do that again. So,
Oh gosh. That sounds like me seeing the Grand Canyon at the age of 15 and me being like, we drive all the way there. I lived in Colombia and we get to the Grand Canyon and I literally look down and I'm like, okay, can we go now? My dad's like, what?
right,
Do you know how many years it took for that to be? So he makes fun of me now as an adult that I'm like, oh, look at that sunset and look at nature and look at this and he's like, is this coming from the same person that looked at the Grand Canyon for like 2 minutes and wanted to leave? So I get it. I was just like Adam. I was that teenager that was like, okay, seen it. Let's go. I don't have to come back.
right, right. But I don't even remember what we were talking
I'm
about, but that
sorry, I
happens
make you
too.
lose it. You were saying that he was when you go on walks. I interrupted. When you
Oh,
go on
okay.
walks and do nature, that he would sometimes not go to the same place again
Right,
because
right.
he'd already been there.
I have been almost desperate to dream about him because people say they dream about their loved one and things like that, and I haven't. But I did the other night, a couple weeks ago. Ed and I were out for dinner, and there was a glass of water on the table. And you know how when there's condensation on the table, certain times the glass will just move on its own? Well, it happened that night. And that was something that always fascinated Adam. He was amazed at how that happened and why it didn't always happen. And the table was flat, but it would still occur. So it happened that night. And then that night, I dreamt about him for the first time. And he was in the dream. And I remember saying in the dream, Adam, don't let this be a dream. You have to tell me that you're really here, that I'm not going to lose you again, and that I'm not dreaming. And he said, No, Mom, you're not dreaming. I'm really here and I'll always be here. And that he was proud of me. And I knew he was always proud of me in life. But like I said before, I also know that he wouldn't like me talking about him. So that was kind of like him giving me his approval about talking about him and sharing him and his life and his story. So that was really, to say the least, really special for me. But and then
Mhm.
the whole next day I really felt this extra warmth around me and that I really felt his presence.
Oh,
But
that's so
yeah, I do
beautiful.
feel him.
The
And I think a
connection.
lot of it is just being open to it.
Mhm. And it's really like I remember the dreams I had have a friend that say would dream with my sister, and I'm like, how come she's dreamed with my sister and I haven't? Or somebody would dream with my mom and I hadn't. Or you kind of get a little jealous when others are. But
Absolutely.
sometimes that just maybe you do sometimes dream more than you just happen to remember when you wake up. We just have to have that in mind too. It just doesn't mean we don't dream. It just could just be we
Right.
don't remember when we wake up. But what I was gonna say is when you're saying about him not liking to talk, you talking about him, which by the way, it's the case of almost every single teenager, because I
Exactly.
respect, yeah, yeah, I respect that from my teenagers myself that they're like, well, why are you talking about that? But I think that when we die, like our ego is associated with our physical being. It's has nothing to do with like I believe in an aspect of soul. Our soul, our essence doesn't have an ego. So I feel that when we die, us talking about another person, the ego is no longer there. So therefore, they probably don't care anymore at that point. There's no, there's no ego associated anymore to the individual. So he's in the fact that again, it's his legacy living on. I'm sure like he said, he is proud of you. He's there with you, and I love that you're sharing him and these memories and the nuances and of not only like his personality, but even just now how he still comes through with that same personality in your life. Shana, as we wrap up, I always like to ask this: is there anything I have not asked you that you want to make sure our listeners take from this conversation?
I want people to have conversations. I think it's important to talk to anyone, to reach out. There are places to reach out for people if they need to talk. The suicide hotline isn't just for people who are struggling with suicide. It can be for someone who is supporting someone who's struggling with suicide, and they can reach out also. There are different groups that have different resources. Um, AFSP, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness. Um, there are, different state and local groups. And, thankfully we have the internet and people can look for those. But, finding people who have that shared experience, whatever that shared experience is so important. And finding people to talk to. And then listening to other people without judgment. Sometimes just being there to listen. You mentioned earlier that you want to ask what happened when someone died, but that may not be the time. But something someone can say is, when you're ready, if you want to talk about it, I'm here to listen. So it's not that salacious, ooh, what happened? But it's offering support, but on their time when they're ready. So I think just being able to talk and being able to listen is what I want people to take from this, whether it's about suicide, mental health, or anything. I think that's so important.
Thank you so much, Shauna. Yes, that is important. It is the fact of just showing up for someone else, holding space, being there. That in itself is enough. Somebody I had, Rabbi Steve Leader, who I had on my podcast actually a couple times. One of the things he said that I really liked is that when you show up to support someone else, show up as you. Like be you. Don't be all of a sudden like if I'm usually mine shows up a lot of times in humor that just because that's just who I am and it might come like weird, but if I were to come to your house and be like, and yes, of course I'm supportive stuff, but if I were to come in and say things I just don't like, kind of like cookie cutter type of phrases, you'd be like, who took possession? Like
Right.
my not only am I grieving, but now my friends are possessed by this I don't know what being that's saying these kind of things. Like they're not even being themselves. So just be you as you're supporting other people in their grief and support them and yeah and also like know that they are them too. Like you're still you. Like if if you're like have this wittiness sense of humor that might show up in your grief
It
as
does.
well, right? Yeah.
It
And
does.
sometimes there's dark humor that shows up. Can you still hear me? My mic is kind of
Yes.
doing funny things. Okay. Yeah. So being knowing that those things still show up in our grief and not judging those ways in which it shows up either. It shows up.
And
Right.
something else I want to add, I started to speak on suicide, and I'm talking about Adam, and I'm talking about me and grief and healing. Other people start nonprofits and raise money to do different things. It doesn't have to be something that monumental. At our support groups, which, by the way, I still go to 4 to 6 times a month, um, at our support groups, I'll point out that showing up and being there for other people and listening to them and offering your experiences back. So just going to that active listening as a friend, that's doing something.
Mm-hmm.
That is providing people with help and being there. And so it doesn't have to be some big grand thing for you to find a purpose. And actually, for me, it's not necessarily find a purpose, but it's finding my identity because I lost who I was.
Yeah, because that's huge, because he's your only child, and
Right.
so that is a whole other aspect of the grief, and that would be a secondary loss to talk about, is that aspect
Absolutely.
of identity, that if you as a mother now have lost your only child, then how do you then represent yourself? You're still Adam's mother, regardless of whether you're still a mother, right? Regardless of whether he's here or not. But still, that aspect of identity is also shifted. So yes, that you're right. Like, there's so many things that change. So finding your identity within the grief, and I tell this to people too. Anytime I have authors, or like you're like has advocacy, or myself with a podcast, not everybody has to carry on the legacy in the same way. Like you said, it could just be doing random acts of kindness in honor of your person. Nobody even has to know that you're doing it in honor of someone else. Nobody even, it's just who we are and how we carry ourselves in our everyday, that we carry on the legacy of those that have died. We have that power of being able to do that every day. So thank you so much,
Thank
Shana.
you.
Again, this was Shana Winter. I'm going to say Shana Winter. It sounds like a soap opera type of name, or an author. I'm waiting for the book now. I'm sure probably there's a book coming there, Shana Winter. And again, for her website is speakonsuicide.com. Show links will be at the bottom, and you can also find her on Instagram or any other social media. Information will again be linked below. Shana, thank you again for sharing your own journey and sharing
Thank
about
you.
Adam with us too. And now,
Thank you for
anytime I
having
see
me.
a chessboard, I'll be thinking of Adam.
There you
That's
go.
gonna be, anytime I see my son. That's who's gonna come to mind. Will be anytime I see chess. So
I'm
just know
honored.
that I'll be
I'm
thinking of
honored.
him anytime
Thank
I
you.
see.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for being here. Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.